6:30 a.m. Her cement mixer truck barrels across my grandfather's hand-laid 1923 stone bridge, rumble. 15 tons of wet concrete crash into Willow Creek. A century of family history shattered in seconds. HOA President Marjorie Whitman, in her crisp white blazer, stands there, laughing. "Oops," she sneers.
"Those old rocks weren't built for real trucks, honey."
She thought it was just a funny accident. What she didn't know? Months before, I'd quietly set everything in motion. Every heavy truck violation documented, every crack monitored, paperwork already filed. That bridge wasn't just family legacy. It was the only legal access to her entire gated community. When her own truck finally broke it, the consequences hit hard. I didn't just watch my legacy get destroyed. I turned her arrogance into the perfect trap. And she walked right into it. Want to see how it all unraveled for her? Watch till the end. What's the wildest thing an entitled neighbor ever did to you? Spill in the comments. I read everyone. Let me take you back 3 months to show you exactly how I set this trap. Picture this. Roman Kellerman, that's me. 52, retired civil engineer who swapped blueprints for hand tools. Inherited 12 acres of Pennsylvania paradise from my grandfather, including the crown jewel, a fieldstone bridge spanning Willow Creek that he built in 1923 with nothing but determination and a slide rule. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd stand on that bridge with my coffee. You could feel the ancient stones under your fingers, still cool and smooth from the night dew. The creek gurgled underneath like a contented cat, while red-winged blackbirds chattered in the cattails. The smell? Pure morning air mixed with sawdust drifting from my workshop, grandfather's converted barn where I crafted custom furniture with his century-old hand tools. My grandfather spent 7 years building this bridge, 7 years selecting each stone, mixing lime mortar by hand, engineering every load calculation with nothing but slide rules and determination. 15-ton maximum capacity, designed for 1920s farm equipment, not modern cement monsters. His original blueprints, soft as tissue paper and smelling faintly of machine oil, still lived in my workshop alongside his perfectly maintained chisels and planes. Here's the critical detail. That bridge was my only vehicle access to County Road 47. Everything else around my property? Protected wetlands and swamp. You want to reach my land, you cross my bridge. No exceptions. Then Hurricane Marjorie made landfall. Marjorie Whitman, 58, blonde bob sharp enough to slice bread, BMW with Whitman Realty vanity plates that screamed entitlement. She'd moved to Millbrook Heights 3 years earlier and immediately launched her campaign to become HOA president on a platform of property value enhancement. Her first gift to me? A certified violation notice declaring my grandfather's barn workshop an unsightly structure requiring immediate community-approved beige paint to maintain neighborhood aesthetic standards. I politely refused, explaining the historical significance and family heritage. Big mistake. She showed up at my door the next morning, designer blazer crisp despite the humidity, smile colder than December. Roman, some people just don't understand modern property values. Maybe you'd be happier somewhere more rustic. The way she said rustic made it sound like a communicable disease. Here's the community dynamics. Millbrook Heights consisted of 47 homes built around my grandfathered property like an expensive noose. Most residents were retirees who appreciated my custom furniture and respected the quiet dignity of preserving family heritage. But Marjorie controlled the 5-member HOA board through a combination of real estate connections, legal intimidation, and carefully applied social pressure. 3 neighbors had already been forced to sell after receiving daily violation notices for infractions like mailbox heights and lawn care schedules. Agnes Bellamy, the retired librarian next door, whispered warnings about Marjorie's tactics. Young couple Tyler and Beth Rodriguez expressed private sympathy but feared public retaliation. Marjorie's real target became clear when she started showing investors around my property without permission, describing her Phase 2 development vision. Luxury condos where my workshop stood, executive homes where grandfather's apple orchard bloomed. All she needed was to convince one stubborn engineer that resistance was futile. Enter Derek Whitman, her nephew and owner of Pinnacle Construction. Built like a bouncer, business ethics of a payday loan operation. When the HOA hired Derek's company to build their new clubhouse, he discovered that using my bridge instead of the county route saved 20 minutes per cement truck run. Monday morning, 7 a.m., I'm savoring my coffee and the birdsong when rumble groan crack echoes across the water. A 25-ton cement mixer is crossing my century-old bridge like it's Interstate 95. I walked over, coffee mug still in hand, workshop apron dusted with walnut shavings. "Excuse me, this is private property with posted weight limits." Derek barely glanced up from his clipboard. "Marjorie cleared it. Got a problem? Take it up with her." Right there, watching my grandfather's carefully mortared stonework crack under that spinning concrete drum, I realized what was really happening. This wasn't about construction convenience. This was systematic warfare designed to destroy my property value and break my spirit until I sold out. But here's what the Whitmans didn't know about retired civil engineers. We document everything, calculate failure points, and plan for every contingency. The trap was already being set. That first truck crossing was just the appetizer. Within a week, Derek had turned my grandfather's bridge into his personal construction highway. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, rumble, groan, crack, cement mixers started their parade across century-old stones that were never meant to handle modern industrial traffic. I called Marjorie directly, professional courtesy, engineer to, well, whatever she was. "Marjorie, your nephew's trucks are damaging my bridge. This needs to stop." Her laugh could have frosted windows. "Oh, Roman, don't be so dramatic. It's just a bridge. Derek needs efficient access for the community clubhouse. You know, the one that'll benefit everyone, even you." "It's private property with posted weight limits." "Weight limits," she said it like I'd mentioned my collection of unicorn tears. "Honey, this is about community progress. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word would come back to destroy her. Within 2 weeks, Derek's operation escalated to military precision. 4 cement mixers per day, sometimes 6. Each truck weighed 25 tons when loaded, nearly double my bridge's safe capacity. The sound alone was like living inside a rock tumbler. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust started choking my morning coffee routine, and loose mortar began falling into Willow Creek like concrete snow. My workshop, where I crafted $3,000 dining tables for discerning clients, turned into a vibration chamber. Hand tools rattled off their pegs with each truck passage. The constant rumbling made my coffee mug dance across the workbench. Delicate furniture joints I'd spent weeks perfecting would crack from the relentless shaking. One morning, I watched a cherry bookcase I'd been working on for 3 months literally shake itself apart. 3 months of careful joinery reduced to expensive kindling because Derek couldn't be bothered to use the county route. That's when my engineering background kicked in. See, when someone's systematically destroying your property, documentation isn't just smart, it's legal ammunition. I'd learned this lesson years ago working insurance cases where proper documentation meant the difference between settlement and bankruptcy. I installed security cameras focused on the bridge approach and started a photo log of increasing damage. Every crack, every loose stone, every instance of posted weight limits being ignored. My grandfather always said, "Measure twice, cut once." Well, I was measuring everything twice and documenting it 3 times. Then I spent 6 hours in the county courthouse basement archives, breathing in that distinctive smell of old paper and bureaucratic dust, researching my property deed. What I found was better than Christmas morning. Specific language stating the bridge was maintained for grantor's sole use and benefit, with exclusive vehicular access rights. Derek had 0 legal right to use my bridge. None. Marjorie's community necessity argument was complete legal fiction. I drafted a cease and desist letter with copies of the deed documentation and hand-delivered it to both Marjorie and Derek. Professional, polite, legally ironclad. Derek's response? He crumpled it up and tossed it in his truck's overflowing trash bin without even reading it. Marjorie's response came through the neighborhood Facebook group. "Some residents are prioritizing personal convenience over community progress. We hope cooler heads will prevail for everyone's benefit." Personal convenience. Like protecting my grandfather's 7-year labor of love was some kind of selfish whim, the community started fracturing. Agnes Bellamy knocked on my door with homemade cookies and quiet support. "I remember when your grandfather built that bridge, Roman. Took him years of evenings and weekends. This isn't right." Tyler and Beth Rodriguez, the young couple with twin toddlers, sent apologetic text messages. They sympathized but feared HOA retaliation, violation notices for playground equipment, or unauthorized garden gnomes. 3 other neighbors did the same, private support, public silence. Meanwhile, Marjorie's real estate investor friends posted passive-aggressive comments online about obstructionist property owners and blocking community improvement. The bridge was literally cracking under pressure. Hairline fractures appeared in the foundation stones like spider webs. The center span developed a slight but measurable sag that made my stomach clench every time I measured it. Each morning brought new damage, new proof of systematic destruction. But here's what really opened my eyes. I started actually weighing Derek's trucks using portable scales I borrowed from a contractor friend. Posted limit, 15 tons. Derek's cement mixers, when fully loaded, 35 to 40 tons. We're talking 250% capacity overload. Like asking a dining room chair to support a refrigerator. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. This was systematic destruction of historical infrastructure, and Derek knew exactly what he was doing. Dr. Patricia Wong, a structural engineer specializing in historical preservation, confirmed my worst fears. Mr. Kellerman, this bridge is perfectly sound for its intended 15-ton capacity, but current loading patterns will cause catastrophic structural failure within 6 to 8 weeks. Catastrophic failure. I filed that phrase away for future use. Derek started getting creative with his destruction. Late-night truck runs to avoid daytime traffic. Crews began accidentally clipping my mailbox, garden fence, and decorative stone markers. Each incident looked like careless maneuvering, but the pattern was clear, escalating property damage designed to break my spirit. One morning, I found fresh tire marks gouged across my front lawn, where a cement mixer had taken a muddy shortcut to the bridge approach. But every violation, every accident, every act of deliberate disrespect just added another documented line item to my growing legal case file. Because here's what Derek and Aunt Marjorie didn't understand about engineers. We don't just get mad. We get systematically, methodically, devastatingly even. Marjorie decided to fight fire with a nuclear weapon. Instead of backing down after my cease and desist letter, she went straight to the county with a complaint that would make Machiavelli proud. If she couldn't legally justify using my bridge, she'd make the bridge itself the problem. Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. I'm in my workshop, hand-sanding a walnut dining table when 3 county vehicles pull into my driveway. The sweet smell of wood shavings mixed with sawdust suddenly turned bitter as Marjorie's white BMW followed behind like a predator escorting its prey to slaughter. Code enforcement, building inspector, and Marjorie, wearing that smile that could freeze hellfire. Inspector Tom Bradley introduced himself with the enthusiasm of a funeral director. Mr. Kellerman, we've received reports about potential structural hazards on your property. Structural hazards. On the bridge that Derek's cement mixers had been systematically demolishing for 6 weeks. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Bradley walked around my bridge, clipboard in hand, occasionally photographing cracks that hadn't existed 2 months ago. Every few minutes he'd glance back at Marjorie, who stood beside her BMW radiating satisfaction like heat from a furnace. Well, Mr. Kellerman, Bradley announced after his theatrical 10-minute inspection, this structure does show concerning deterioration. We'll need a certified structural assessment before determining if public safety is compromised. Public safety, on my private bridge connecting to my private property. Those cracks are from overweight trucks trespassing on my land, I explained, pulling out my documentation folder. I've been photographing the damage progression. Bradley's expression suggested I'd just blamed the damage on Bigfoot. Sir, we deal with current conditions. Until we get professional assessment, we're recommending immediate restrictions on heavy vehicle access. Marjorie stepped forward with Oscar-worthy concern. Inspector Bradley, what about emergency vehicles? School buses? This bridge could be vital for community safety. School buses. Emergency vehicles. For the bridge that connected only to my isolated 12 acres. You had to admire the woman's brass. But here's the thing about dealing with bureaucrats for 30 years. The system has rules, and those rules slice both ways when you understand them. I'd learned this lesson fighting permit battles on major construction projects where documentation and proper procedures could save or cost millions. That afternoon, I hired Dr. Patricia Wong to perform the required structural assessment. Cost, $2,500. Value, absolutely priceless because Patricia documented everything with forensic precision. Her report was engineering poetry. Structure exhibits localized stress damage consistent with systematic loading beyond design parameters. Bridge remains structurally sound for intended 15-ton capacity. Observable damage correlates directly with documented overweight vehicle crossings. Translation: Derek's trucks broke it, and here's the mathematical proof. While waiting for Patricia's report, I upgraded my surveillance system. Motion sensors, night vision, infrared capability, the works. These cameras didn't just record, they created admissible legal evidence with GPS timestamps and weather data. Derek's response? Creative destruction became his art form. Late-night operations became standard procedure. 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., cement mixers would rumble across my bridge when they assumed I was sleeping. The sound would jolt me awake, diesel engines straining, air brakes hissing like angry snakes, the metallic clank of loose equipment rattling in truck beds. But I wasn't sleeping. I was gathering evidence. The accidents escalated predictably. My mailbox got clipped so regularly I started buying replacements wholesale. Garden fence posts disappeared during difficult maneuvers. Most heartbreaking, my grandfather's original boundary stones, century-old markers he'd carved by hand, began vanishing entirely. One morning, I discovered tire tracks gouged through my front yard where someone had driven a loaded cement mixer straight across grandfather's oak grove. The smell of churned earth mixed with diesel fuel made my stomach turn. Those oaks were planted the year I was born. Marjorie launched her psychological warfare campaign simultaneously. Neighborhood coffee meetings became forums for discussing my concerning behavior and dangerous obsession. She called an emergency HOA session to address what she termed the community access crisis. 27 homeowners attended. Marjorie prosecuted her case with courtroom precision. Roman Kellerman was selfishly obstructing community progress and potentially endangering public welfare. Agnes Bellamy stood during public comment, her librarian's voice cutting through the murmur. That bridge predates this entire development. Roman is protecting legitimate property rights. Tyler Rodriguez hesitantly raised his hand. Couldn't we find alternative access routes? But Marjorie's real estate investor allies dominated the room, painting me as an obstructionist preventing neighborhood enhancement and property value growth. The vote? 18-9 supporting reasonable resolution. Here's what they didn't know. Local reporter Sarah Martinez was recording everything from the back row, asking pointed questions about who profits when longtime residents get forced out. The real breakthrough came when I started cross-referencing Derek's trucks with DOT transportation records. His official paperwork consistently reported 15-ton loads. My scale measurements? Consistently 40 tons, federal transportation fraud, systematic falsification of commercial vehicle weights. That's when I realized Marjorie hadn't just picked a fight with the wrong engineer. She'd accidentally handed me evidence of federal crimes. Marjorie's next move proved she'd completely lost her mind. 3 days after the county inspection, I found a certified letter that made my hands shake. Notice of intent to sue, stamped across the top in blood-red ink. Marjorie Whitman, representing Millbrook Heights HOA, was threatening to drag me to court for intentional interference with legitimate commercial operations. Legitimate commercial operations, on my private bridge, without my permission. Her legal theory was breathtaking in its audacity. Because Derek's trucks had been using my bridge for weeks, they'd established customary access rights through adverse possession of easement. I couldn't legally revoke access without providing reasonable alternative accommodation. I called attorney Rebecca Walsh and read the filing aloud. The silence stretched so long I thought my phone had died. Rebecca? Roman. In 20 years of practice, this is the most legally delusional document I've ever encountered. She's arguing that systematic trespassing creates property rights. It's like claiming you own someone's house because you broke in repeatedly. But legal insanity doesn't mean harmless. Fighting frivolous lawsuits still costs thousands in attorney fees, court costs, and lost sleep. Marjorie was betting I'd surrender rather than spend my retirement savings defending obvious property rights. She'd picked the wrong engineer to intimidate. Derek simultaneously launched his psychological warfare campaign. Construction crews started working late directly at my property line, running diesel generators and floodlights until midnight. The constant mechanical rumbling made sleep impossible. The acrid smell of burning diesel fuel mixed with concrete dust turned my peaceful evenings into industrial torture sessions. Equipment began accidentally blocking my driveway during peak hours. Cement mixers would park across my gate for brief equipment checks that lasted exactly long enough to make me miss furniture delivery appointments. When I asked crews to move, they'd claim radio problems or mysteriously missing drivers. My custom furniture business started hemorrhaging money. 3 major clients canceled orders after receiving anonymous calls suggesting I was unreliable and involved in dangerous legal disputes. One customer forwarded me a voicemail from Derek himself, claiming my workshop was under investigation for safety violations. The smell of success, hand-planed walnut and fresh varnish, was being replaced by the stench of diesel exhaust and legal intimidation. Then the midnight harassment started. Phone rings at 2 a.m., heavy breathing, then silence. Wrong number calls asking for Roman the Bridge Troll, fake pizza deliveries to my address at dinner time. My insurance company received anonymous tips about electrical hazards and fire code violations in my workshop. Each incident looked random. Together they screamed organized harassment campaign. Marjorie's legal masterpiece was calling an emergency HOA meeting to vote on eminent domain proceedings for essential community infrastructure. She'd discovered obscure Pennsylvania statutes, allowing HOAs to petition counties for eminent domain when private property serves broader public welfare. My bridge connecting exclusively to my private 12 acres. 34 neighbors packed the overheated community center. The smell of burnt coffee mixed with nervous perspiration as people chose sides. You could feel the tension crackling like electricity before a storm. Marjorie had prepared a PowerPoint presentation worthy of corporate boardrooms, aerial photographs, traffic flow analyses, economic impact projections. She argued my bridge represented critical infrastructure, serving essential community transportation needs. Agnes Bellamy stood during public comment, her retired librarian's voice cutting through the murmur with laser precision. This is legalized theft disguised as community planning. Roman owns that bridge, period. Tyler Rodriguez looked physically uncomfortable but found his courage. Maybe we should explore reasonable compromises before threatening property seizure? Beth Rodriguez added, our children play near Roman's Creek. He's never complained once. This feels fundamentally wrong. But Marjorie had orchestrated the room. Her real estate investor allies dominated discussion, arguing that selfish individual interests shouldn't obstruct legitimate community development and economic progress. During the coffee break, I overheard two of her supporters discussing Phase 2 development deadlines. The missing puzzle piece suddenly clicked into place. Marjorie needed guaranteed bridge access within 90 days to satisfy investor contracts for her luxury expansion project. This wasn't about community convenience. This was about her potential $340,000 real estate commission on a $2.3 million development scheme. The vote was closer than she'd anticipated, 19 to 15, authorizing legal consultation regarding eminent domain feasibility. After the meeting, Agnes Bellamy approached me in the parking lot, glancing nervously around. Roman, more people support you than you realize. They're terrified of HOA retaliation. Marjorie's been threatening violation notices for anyone who defends you publicly. That night, reviewing security footage by lamplight, I discovered something that made my heart race. Derek's trucks weren't just systematically overloaded, they were systematically uninsured. License plate cross-checks revealed half his cement mixers weren't properly registered for commercial operation. No commercial insurance coverage, no proper DOT permits, no mandatory safety inspections. Marjorie thought she was crushing me into submission. What she'd actually done was document federal transportation crimes that could destroy Derek's business entirely and expose her to criminal conspiracy charges. The trap was almost ready to spring. The game-changing discovery happened at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday, in a courthouse basement that smelled like forgotten dreams and bureaucratic dust. I couldn't sleep. Again. Derek's late-night cement mixers had turned my bedroom into a seismograph, recording every bone-rattling rumble across Willow Creek. So I did what any insomniac engineer does when his family legacy is under attack. I went hunting for ammunition in century-old paperwork, county courthouse archives, dust thick enough to taste, fluorescent lights flickering like dying stars, towers of moldering records from when Pennsylvania was still figuring out what civilization looked like. I was searching for anything to strengthen my property rights case. What I found instead was a nuclear weapon disguised as a 1923 county filing. Buried in a stack of yellowed ordinances, paper soft as butterfly wings. Private bridge construction permit for Kellerman property, Willow Creek Crossing, with permanent utility easement provisions and infrastructure corridor designation. Utility easement provisions. My hands started trembling as I read the technical specifications scrawled in grandfather's careful engineering script. He hadn't just built a bridge, he'd constructed a utility lifeline. The stone foundation included hollow channels specifically engineered for electrical conduits, water lines, and future municipal infrastructure needs. Every single utility serving Millbrook Heights ran through my bridge foundation. I sat in that tomb of paperwork surrounded by decades of bureaucratic archaeology and started laughing. Not joy, the hysterical laughter that comes when you realize your enemies have been playing checkers while you've unknowingly been controlling the entire chessboard. If my bridge collapsed completely, 47 homes would lose electricity, water, and internet simultaneously. Emergency utility rerouting would require environmental impact studies, creek diversion permits, historical preservation approvals, and months of regulatory nightmares. Conservative cost estimate from county infrastructure reports, $400,000 minimum, assuming perfect weather and no legal challenges. But the revelation got more beautiful. Racing home through pre-dawn darkness, I spent the remaining night cross-referencing property deeds, utility maps, and development permits. Marjorie's Phase 2 expansion required upgrading utility capacity through existing infrastructure corridors, my infrastructure corridors. Without guaranteed access to expand utilities through my bridge foundation, her entire $2.3 million development scheme became physically impossible. Not expensive, not difficult, impossible. Morning sunlight streaming through my workshop windows illuminated the exquisite irony. While Marjorie had been threatening to steal my bridge, she'd been unknowingly dependent on it for her complete financial survival. Then I discovered her investor fraud. Marjorie's development presentations, public record through county planning, promised investors guaranteed utility expansion capacity and existing infrastructure access as primary selling points for Phase 2. She'd been raising investment capital based on infrastructure she didn't own, couldn't legally access, and had been systematically destroying for 3 months. Securities fraud, asset misrepresentation, conspiracy to defraud investors. I reviewed Derek's latest security footage with fresh understanding. Those hairline foundation cracks weren't just property damage anymore. They were stress fractures in utility conduits, keeping an entire neighborhood operational. My engineering calculations showed complete structural failure within 2 weeks if current loading continued. When that happened, the legal tsunami would be magnificent. Emergency repair costs, utility liability claims, investor fraud investigations, federal transportation violations, and environmental damage suits. Every cement mixer crossing was digging Marjorie's financial grave deeper while building my criminal case stronger. The beautiful symmetry finally made sense. Grandfather hadn't just been building transportation infrastructure in 1923, he'd been creating generational leverage that would protect family property rights against exactly this kind of corporate bullying. His engineering was decades ahead of its time, anticipating utility needs that modern developers had completely overlooked. While Marjorie played short-term real estate games, Grandfather had been thinking century-long strategic defense. I contacted the Historical Society that afternoon to expedite heritage protection status, adding another layer of regulatory complexity to any repair attempts. The trap was loaded and aimed. All I needed was Derek's next overloaded mixer to deliver the final blow that would destroy Marjorie's empire forever. The next morning I stopped playing defense and declared war. First call, Rebecca Walsh, my property attorney. Rebecca, I need every legal weapon in your arsenal loaded and ready. When this bridge collapses, I want papers hitting Marjorie faster than Derek's cement trucks. Roman, once we file everything simultaneously, there's no backing down. Good. They destroyed my family legacy truck by truck. I'm about to destroy their entire empire lawsuit by lawsuit. My workshop became mission control. Cameras, sensors, legal documents covering every surface like a general planning D-Day. The sweet smell of sawdust was gradually being replaced by the metallic scent of justice being prepared. The centerpiece was Grandfather's hidden genius. Buried beneath decades of moss and weathering, his original 1923 steel anchor points were still perfectly functional. I designed removable bridge barriers that would slot directly into those century-old mounting sockets. Testing the fit gave me goosebumps. Modern steel sliding into historical anchors with Swiss watch precision, like Grandfather had been waiting 100 years to help me spring this trap. You could almost hear him chuckling from beyond the grave. Took you long enough to find them, boy. I installed weight-triggered alarms connected to cameras and county emergency services. Any truck over 15 tons would automatically notify my phone, start HD recording, and alert Inspector Bradley's office. No more he said, she said bullshit about timing or weights. Sarah Martinez, the newspaper reporter, was building her own ammunition stockpile. I'd given her 3 months of documentation, and she'd uncovered the bigger scandal: systematic harassment of longtime property owners by development-focused HOA boards throughout central Pennsylvania. "Roman, you're victim number 5 this year," Sarah explained over coffee in my workshop. Her notepad balanced precariously on my sawdust-covered workbench. 4 other families got pressured into below-market sales after mysterious safety violations and legal complications appeared. That's when I understood. This wasn't personal harassment. This was a business model. Identify vulnerable properties, apply systematic pressure through legal intimidation, force distressed sales, then profit from development rights. Industrial-scale property theft disguised as community improvement. Agnes Bellamy organized grassroots resistance through coffee and conversation sessions. 18 neighbors attended the first meeting in her living room, the aroma of homemade chocolate chip cookies mixing with decades of suppressed frustration as people finally spoke honestly about HOA terror tactics. "They threatened violation notices when Derek's trucks damaged our mailbox," Tyler Rodriguez admitted, nervously bouncing his toddler. "Marjorie said we were responsible for maintaining street-side aesthetics even though her nephew caused the damage." Beth Rodriguez nodded vigorously. "When I complained about diesel fumes affecting Emma's asthma, Marjorie suggested we might be happier somewhere less industrial." Made it sound like a friendly suggestion, but the threat was clear. Every story followed identical patterns. Identify resistance, apply escalating pressure, maintain plausible deniability until surrender. Dr. Patricia Wong provided the technical knockout punch. Advanced structural monitoring equipment could now detect microfractures in real time and predict catastrophic failure with mathematical certainty. "Roman, this bridge will fail within 5 to 7 days if current loading continues," Patricia confirmed, watching stress data stream across her laptop screen like a digital death countdown. "Foundation settlement is accelerating exponentially. Complete structural collapse is inevitable." Music to my ears. Predictable failure with forensic documentation and precise timing. I coordinated with County Environmental Services about creek contamination. Derek's cement mixers had been leaking hydraulic fluid, concrete wash, and diesel fuel into Willow Creek for 3 months. Environmental Protection Agency violations carry federal criminal penalties and mandatory cleanup costs that would make Marjorie's head spin. Here's what most people don't understand about systematic crime documentation. When you properly build cases over months, you create prosecutorial avalanches that agencies can't ignore. Property violations become federal transportation fraud. Trespassing becomes environmental crimes. Harassment becomes criminal conspiracy. The coordination was beautiful in its complexity. When my bridge collapsed, I'd simultaneously file restraining orders, criminal charges, federal violations, environmental damage claims, investor fraud reports, and civil suits totaling millions in potential damages. Marjorie thought she was bullying one stubborn old engineer. She was actually about to face coordinated assault from county, state, and federal agencies armed with irrefutable evidence of systematic criminal activity. My security system now recorded everything in 4K with backup storage in 3 locations. Any evidence tampering would add obstruction of justice charges to their growing criminal inventory. Sarah Martinez had contacted regional property rights organizations eager to publicize successful resistance to HOA overreach. This story would go viral as the perfect case study in David demolishing Goliath through preparation and persistence. That evening, I organized documentation files with military precision. Every photograph GPS tagged and time-stamped. Every conversation recorded and transcribed. Every violation cross-referenced with applicable laws and potential penalties. Grandfather's century-old hand tools sat beside my laptop like ancient weapons, blessing modern warfare. His chisels and planes watching over digital evidence that would obliterate the people trying to erase his legacy. The trap was loaded, aimed, and hungry for targets. Derek's next cement mixer would trigger the most expensive legal education in Pennsylvania history. And that brings us back to Tuesday morning, 6:30 a.m., watching Marjorie's world explode along with my grandfather's bridge. Splash, crack, rumble. 15 tons of wet concrete, spinning steel, and sheer stupidity plummeting into Willow Creek while my phone erupted with automated alerts, weight sensors screaming, HD cameras recording, emergency notifications firing to county services like digital fireworks. The trap I'd spent 3 months setting had just snapped shut with the precision of a Swiss watch. I was speed dialing 911 before the diesel smoke cleared. County emergency? Roman Kellerman reporting destruction of critical infrastructure by unauthorized commercial vehicle. Bridge collapse has severed utilities for 47 residential properties. We need emergency services immediately. Within 10 minutes, my driveway looked like a disaster movie set. County vehicles, emergency crews, and one very pale Inspector Bradley clutching his clipboard like a life preserver as he stared at the structurally questionable bridge he'd been investigating, now demolished beyond recognition. Derek stood chest-deep in creek water beside his upended cement mixer, wet concrete hardening around his work boots like karmic quicksand. The truck's barrel had finally stopped spinning, leaving an eerie mechanical silence broken only by water bubbling around twisted metal and the distant sound of 47 houses losing power simultaneously. That's when Marjorie's white BMW came screaming into my driveway like a heat-seeking missile. She jumped out, designer blazer already showing sweat stains, perfectly styled hair falling apart as reality crashed over her like Derek's cement truck. One look at the destruction and her face cycled through shock, denial, anger, and pure terror in 15 seconds flat. "Derek, you absolute moron! I told you to be careful with that stupid bridge!" "Aunt Marjorie, it just collapsed. The thing was ancient. Not my fault it couldn't handle real trucks." Real trucks. Like destroying century-old craftsmanship was a badge of honor. But the real fireworks started when Sarah Martinez arrived with her photographer, camera ready to document both the bridge collapse and Marjorie's financial apocalypse. "Mrs. Whitman, how do you respond to accusations that your nephew's systematic trespassing has now left 47 families without basic utilities?" Marjorie's media training evaporated under pressure like morning dew. This was clearly an accident. Roman should have maintained his infrastructure better. Will obviously contribute to reasonable repairs. Contribute to repairs. After 3 months of systematic demolition, I stepped forward with my documentation bomb. 3 months of evidence in a waterproof case that had been waiting for this exact moment like a patient predator. "Inspector Bradley, here's comprehensive documentation of systematic overloading beyond safe capacity. Derek's trucks averaged 38 tons when this bridge was rated for 15 maximum. Bradley's hands shook as he flipped through time-stamped photographs showing progressive destruction, weight sensor data, and professional structural analysis. The smell of his nervous sweat mixed with diesel fumes and wet concrete. "Mr. Kellerman, this is the most thorough property damage case I've ever encountered. Gets better. Environmental services will want the creek contamination evidence, and federal DOT investigators will love Derek's falsified transportation weight reports." Derek's face went ghost white. "What falsified reports?" "The ones claiming 15-ton loads while hauling 40-ton cement mixers across private property for 12 weeks. Federal transportation fraud, Derek. That's federal prison time." Marjorie attempted desperate damage control. "Now, Roman, surely we can discuss reasonable compensation between neighbors." Neighbors. After threatening lawsuits, eminent domain, and systematic harassment. The knockout punch arrived when County Commissioner Patricia Haynes pulled up with the emergency utilities team. She surveyed the severed infrastructure conduits in my destroyed bridge foundation, and her expression shifted from professional concern to absolute horror. "Mrs. Whitman, do you understand that emergency utility rerouting will require environmental impact studies, historical preservation reviews, creek diversion permits, and approximately 18 months of regulatory approvals?" Marjorie's voice cracked like thin ice. 18 months? Minimum. Emergency temporary service alone will cost roughly $400,000, assuming no legal challenges or environmental complications. I watched Marjorie's brain calculate the math of her own destruction. $400,000 for emergency utilities, 18 months of regulatory hell. Her Phase 2 development contracts required completion within 90 days. Her entire multi-million-dollar empire had just drowned in Willow Creek, along with Derek's cement mixer. The crowd of neighbors had swollen to 40+, drawn by emergency vehicles and the intoxicating aroma of justice being served. Agnes Bellamy stood front and center, arms crossed, watching karma deliver its final invoice with compound interest. Tyler and Beth Rodriguez brought their kids to witness neighborhood history. The day systematic bullying backfired spectacularly. Derek's cement mixer sat in the creek like a concrete monument to stupidity, slowly sinking into muddy bottom while hydraulic fluid painted rainbow patterns across the water surface. I pulled out my phone for the final documentation. Tuesday, September 15th, 8:23 a.m. Marjorie Whitman's 3-month campaign of systematic property destruction has successfully eliminated her own development project and triggered the most expensive property rights lesson in Pennsylvania history. The trap had crushed its targets. Now came the legal massacre. The emergency town hall meeting 3 days later looked like a legal execution. County Commissioner Patricia Haynes had called the session to address what local media was already calling the Millbrook Heights infrastructure disaster. 200 residents packed the overheated community center, along with reporters, legal representatives, and enough county officials to run a small government. The smell of burnt coffee mixed with nervous perspiration as people filed into folding chairs that squeaked like stressed metal. You could feel the tension crackling like electricity before a thunderstorm. I sat in the front row with my evidence boxes, Rebecca Walsh beside me, looking like a prosecutor ready to deliver closing arguments. Across the aisle, Marjorie huddled with 3 expensive lawyers who kept whispering urgently and checking their phones. Derek wasn't there. He'd been arrested that morning on federal transportation fraud charges. Commissioner Haynes opened the session with bureaucratic efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to address the bridge collapse that has severed utilities for 47 residential properties and created significant legal complications for planned development projects. Legal complications. Like systematic property destruction was a minor paperwork issue. Marjorie's lead attorney stood first, a silver-haired gentleman who probably charged $500 to clear his throat. Commissioner, my client maintains this was an unfortunate accident caused by inadequate infrastructure maintenance. Mrs. Whitman is prepared to contribute reasonably to repairs. Contribute reasonably. After 3 months of documented harassment, Rebecca Walsh rose like an avenging angel with a law degree. Commissioner, may I present evidence that this was not an accident but the inevitable result of systematic property destruction? She activated the large screen display and the room gasped. High-definition footage of Derek's cement mixers crossing my bridge, time-stamped weight sensor data showing massive overloads, photographs documenting progressive structural damage over 12 weeks. The visual evidence was devastating. You could watch my bridge slowly dying, truck by truck, crack by crack, while Marjorie and Derek ignored every warning and legal notice. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, we have documented evidence of harassment, intimidation, and investor fraud related to this systematic property destruction. She played audio recordings of Marjorie's threats, displayed copies of falsified weight reports, and showed investor presentations promising infrastructure access rights that didn't exist. The room erupted. Neighbors shouting questions, reporters scribbling frantically, lawyers whispering damage control strategies that were already too late. Agnes Bellamy stood during public comment, her librarian's voice cutting through chaos with laser precision. I've lived here longer than anyone except Roman. That bridge was beautiful, functional, and historic. What happened was vandalism disguised as community progress. Tyler Rodriguez found his courage. My family supported the community projects, but this went too far. Threatening people's homes over property rights is wrong. Beth Rodriguez added, our children played safely in Romans Creek for years. He never complained, never charged fees, never made anyone feel unwelcome. This harassment was unconscionable. But the real drama started when County Environmental Officer Janet Morrison presented her creek contamination report. 3 months of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, and concrete wash had turned Willow Creek into an ecological disaster zone. Cleanup costs will exceed $200,000, with criminal environmental violations pending against Pinnacle Construction and potentially against any parties who authorized this activity. Marjorie's face went whiter than her BMW. $200,000 for environmental cleanup, $400,000 for emergency utility rerouting, 18 months of regulatory delays killing her development contracts. The numbers were adding up to complete financial annihilation. Reporter Sarah Martinez stood for questions. Mrs. Whitman, how do you respond to evidence that you promised investors guaranteed infrastructure access while systematically destroying that same infrastructure? Marjorie's composure finally cracked. This whole situation has been blown completely out of proportion. Roman was obstructing legitimate community development. His bridge was old and dangerous. Old and dangerous. The bridge that had stood safely for a century until her nephew turned it into rubble. That's when I stood up for my moment. The room fell silent as I walked to the microphone, carrying grandfather's original 1923 blueprints. 200 people holding their breath while I unrolled century-old engineering drawings that had predicted this exact scenario. Commissioner Haynes, my grandfather built this bridge to last centuries, not decades. He included utility corridors specifically to support future community growth. Mrs. Whitman's nephew didn't just destroy my family legacy, he destroyed the infrastructure foundation that her own development depended on. I paused, letting that sink in before delivering the mic drop line that would make county legal history. Mrs. Whitman spent 3 months telling me to get with the times. Well, here's what modern property law looks like when you systematically destroy someone's century-old family legacy. Rebecca Walsh stood and began reading the legal avalanche. Restraining orders against further trespassing, criminal charges for property destruction and environmental violations, federal charges for transportation fraud, civil suits for damages totaling $847,000, and investor fraud investigations that could result in federal securities charges. The silence was deafening. You could hear Marjorie's financial empire collapsing like Derek's cement mixer hitting creek bottom. Commissioner Haynes delivered the final blow. Based on evidence presented, this commission finds that systematic trespassing and property destruction has created liability exposure exceeding $2.3 million for the Millbrook Heights HOA and associated parties. $2.3 million, exactly what Marjorie's development was supposed to be worth. 6 months later, I'm standing on my new bridge watching red-winged blackbirds build nests in the cattails like nothing ever happened. But everything had changed. The legal aftermath was swift and merciless. Marjorie filed for personal bankruptcy within 30 days, her real estate license suspended pending fraud investigations that would eventually send her to federal prison for 18 months. Her white BMW got repossessed on a Tuesday morning while neighbors watched from their windows. Derek's Pinnacle Construction lost its license permanently. Federal transportation fraud charges earned him 2 years in minimum security prison and a lifetime ban from commercial trucking. His cement mixers were auctioned to pay environmental cleanup costs. The HOA settlement funded my bridge reconstruction using grandfather's original engineering principles enhanced with modern materials. Traditional stonework techniques taught to local craftsmen preserved heritage skills while creating jobs for neighbors who'd supported my fight. But the real victory was community transformation. New HOA leadership, elected unanimously after Marjorie's resignation, established the Historical Property Protection Protocol, comprehensive guidelines preventing harassment of longtime residents and protecting family legacies. Agnes Bellamy became president on a platform of respect for what came before. Property values actually increased due to historical designation and controlled development. The bridge became a county landmark featured in tourism materials, bringing visitors who appreciated craftsmanship and community character over corporate development schemes. My furniture business exploded after the story went viral. National attention from property rights organizations brought custom commission requests from across the country. People wanted furniture built by the engineer who defeated systematic bullying through documentation and determination. The workshop smelled like success again. Hand-planed walnut and fresh varnish replacing diesel exhaust and legal intimidation. Grandfather's century-old tools hummed with productivity, creating heirloom pieces for families who understood the value of lasting craftsmanship. Tyler and Beth Rodriguez became close friends, their kids playing safely in the restored creek while learning traditional woodworking in my workshop. Community relationships strengthened through shared struggle, neighbors understanding that property rights protect everyone's investments. The Heritage Trade Scholarship I established uses settlement money to teach young people traditional crafts, stonework, timber framing, blacksmithing skills that built communities before corporate development schemes. 12 apprentices have learned heritage techniques while earning college-level certifications. Environmental restoration became a community project. The creek ecosystem flourished without heavy truck pollution, attracting wildlife photographers and conservation groups. Native fish populations returned, and the cattail marshes expanded into natural water filtration systems. But my favorite victory was personal healing. Morning coffee rituals returned to peaceful perfection. Dawn mist rising off clean creek water, blackbirds chattering and healthy cattails, the satisfying sound of hand tools shaping honest wood in grandfather's restored workshop. I discovered additional family documents revealing grandfather's foresight about development pressure. His 1920s engineering included expansion joints and reinforcement points anticipating future growth while protecting family independence. He'd been thinking generational strategy when most people planned year to year. The bridge carries more than vehicles now. It symbolizes successful resistance to corporate bullying and the power of preparation over intimidation. Tour groups visit monthly, learning how one engineer's documentation defeated systematic property theft. Property rights advocacy organizations adopted my case as a model for fighting HOA overreach. The Kellerman Documentation Protocol teaches property owners how to build legal cases through systematic evidence gathering before problems become crises. Sarah Martinez won a state journalism award for investigating development pressure on rural property owners. Her series exposed similar harassment campaigns throughout Pennsylvania, leading to legislative protections for historical properties and longtime residents. Agnes Bellamy organized the annual Heritage Day Festival, celebrating original structures and traditional crafts. Thousands attend yearly, supporting local artisans while learning community history that predates corporate development schemes. The festival's motto, carved in granite beside my restored bridge, "Some things are worth preserving." But the deepest satisfaction comes from knowing grandfather's legacy is secure for future generations. His engineering genius protected family land for a century and will continue protecting it for centuries more. Every morning I run my fingers across stones he selected, mortar he mixed, joints he calculated with slide rules and determination. The bridge connects past and future, tradition and progress, individual rights and community benefit. Derek's cement mixer still sits in the creek, slowly rusting into abstract sculpture that reminds visitors what happens when corporate arrogance meets historical engineering. Kids use it as a playground while learning the difference between building something lasting and destroying what others built. The trap worked perfectly. Systematic harassment became systematic evidence. Property destruction became property protection. Corporate bullying became community bonding.